Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and so we're back to the tie-in novels, because I actually have a fairly large collection of them, although admittedly most of them are Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but you know how that goes when you just don't feel like reading something in particular. But anyways, so Star Trek The Next Generation, Here There Be Dragons. So the conceit of the idea behind this novel is, first of all, that there are the so-called preservers, which that may be an original Trek thing. I did not, in fact, watch the vast bulk of the original Star Trek, so if that is a thing from the original Star Trek, then, I don't know, but it's not something I recall from, Next Gen. But the concept of the preservers is basically that they're some sort of ancient species, one of those species that in other television series wind up being known as the ancients or the precursors or the thingy that indicates that they were real old. And they apparently had this shtick where they would collect some group of people who were potentially going to go extinct or something and separate them out from wherever they were and plop them on a planet somewhere isolated from everything, allowing them to develop or not as they would, sort of as they would, having no outside influences. In this case, they went to 13th, 12th, something century Germany and collected 12 villages and plunked them down on a planet where there were actual things that could definably be called dragons. That is, they went to a society that believed in dragons and said, let's put them somewhere where there actually are dragons. Hence the title. Anyways, so a bunch of crooks find out about this and decide that they're going to set up a game hunting preserve and let people go and hunt dragons for a fee, and that's illegal, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so there's the usual thing. There's an away team. The away team gets, captured and separated from each other and have to battle their way back and stop the bad guys and save people from things, and the Enterprise is nearly destroyed. Standard Star Trek fare. But there are a couple of things in here that I found interesting. The first in this book is, and now I do these because I want to talk about books that I liked, and I do enjoy this book. There's a lot in this book to enjoy. Picard's periods of absolute geeker glee about getting to see a medieval period village that is functioning and, that it is actually a medieval village, that they have not changed how they do things at all, and so there's this wonderful, there's this sort of wonderful, ship in a bottle thing where he gets to see it, and as an archaeologist, as a historian, this is something that's really, really awesome for him. And when he runs across a student, Michael Kirsch, or possibly Kirk, probably Kirsch, my German is virtually nil, and they get to talking, sure, Picard can't, talk to him as somebody who has all of the access to all of the information that, you would as a 24th century intellectual, but it's a highly intelligent young man, and he's able to have an intelligent and interesting conversation, and so there's a lot of, enjoyment to be had simply from Picard enjoying the intellectual stuff, and it's a wonderful sort of side note of Picard because, of course, Picard is the captain of the Enterprise. He's a military man. He's, an explorer, science, yada, yada, yada. But he is also somebody with a deep appreciation of intellectual puzzles. He is somebody who very genuinely had the option and could have gone on to be a renowned archaeologist and turned down the option. And so those sorts of things are are always lovely sidebar discussions when you dip into Picard's perspective. And this particular book really does leave, a lot of space for that. So that was very, very enjoyable. The other thing that was very enjoyable is something that I will get back to in a moment, because I have to, however briefly, complain about the mischaracterization of Worf in this. It is the one flaw in this book. I mean, it's not perfect. It's a pocketbook. It's a cheap paperback novel. It's, TV tie-in. It has those kinds of flaws that you get with that. But within the context of what it is, its one serious flaw, in my opinion, is very much the flaw of Worf's characterization. Because Worf, in this, the thing about Worf is that he is a very staid, very respectable, very upright, very restrained person. That even when he's upset, even when he's, getting aggressive, even when he does those things, there is this sense of restraint and it's actually very non-Klingon in characteristic, that when you look at him and you compare him to other Klingons that we see on the series, Worf is incredibly beyond restrained. I mean, he's not Vulcan, but, he is... The fact is that in a lot of ways, only Vulcans tend to be more restrained than Worf is. I mean, I may be exaggerating slightly, but it's a very, very strong characteristic in him. And in this book, he spends half of the book whining about the fact that he wants to go down to the planet's surface and play knights, and go, why can't I go? And it's like, he knows why he can't go to a planet filled with primitive humans who have never seen an alien before and would look at Worf and his ginormous lumpy forehead and go, what the hell is that? He knows this, and yet somehow we spend half of the time, his time in the book is spent whining about this. And then, the ongoing whining, and then when the ship is having to maneuver through these gravity warping bomb things, and Worf is all cheerful and happy because it's a challenge worthy of their mettle. And the problem is, Worf is a warrior type, and while I don't think that Worf would ever belittle calculations, Worf's job is pretty much just calculations at that moment. He's not even firing phasers. So the whole thing is just kind of out of character, but the only thing that is in character is Worf's incandescent ire at the end of the book when he gets dressed up as something out of the Arabian Nights, because this person who I am going to get back to now, because this is my segue, I believe her surname would be pronounced Smolinski. I could be wrong. I don't know whether the E is supposed to be pronounced at the end or not. But the point is that Picard says, get him down here and dress him up as something like a demon or a devil, something magical, and she dresses him up as a genie. And it's just like, where in your scale of things did you think that a genie was the sort of magical the captain was thinking of when he said dress him up as something like a devil or a demon? It's painful. Anyways, so Smolinski, this is a character who we don't see at any point during the course of the series, and she would seem to be a completely illogical addition, but for the fact that the Enterprise, all of the Enterprises, always run into the weirdest stuff. And that is, they have a professional costumer on board the ship. That is, a woman whose job is whose job is to, when people come up to her and say, I need you to make me look like a 13th century German troubadour, that she says, here's the appropriate clothing to wear as a 13th century German troubadour. And this is just what she does. And they apparently just have this on board the Enterprise for reasons. And I don't understand it, but for the fact that when you think about all of the stuff, all of the time travel, all of the temporally misplaced people, all of the weird alien societies, all of the whatever the heck Waxana Troy gets up to, having somebody on board whose job it is to know how to dress you up when you find yourself in 1920s New York or Chicago, and to just say, here's clothes, this is a thing that we know this is going to happen, here's clothes. The fact that apparently just asking the computer to replicate a thing is wholly inadequate is amusing to me, because it's this strange little bit of outward world building that I think Mr. John Peel, who wrote this, may have only added that bit for the sake of having Worf dressed up as something out of the Arabian Nights at the end, so that he could do that grumpy Worf thing. You know the grumpy Worf thing, that thing where you have Worf and he's just, somebody's done something that impugns his dignity and he's just grouchy about it. Like that episode with Waxana Troy where they end up in the mud bath at the end and Worf is just so discomfited. But the thing is that Smolinski is just such an illogical thing until you consider just the Enterprise. And I find myself imagining people at Starfleet headquarters when they're arranging for, who's going to be populating the Enterprise, and they're like, yeah, we need this many science, we need to tell Picard he needs to bring on this many science officers, and we're going to need this many, xenobiologists, and we're going to need this many botanists, and we're going to need this many, we're going to need childcare experts because we're going to have families on board, and we're going to need this and this and this. And somebody says, yeah, and we should send a professional costumer with them. And somebody's responding to this guy by going, but what? It's the Enterprise? Don't you remember what happened with Kirk and that person with the Enterprise B? And what happened with the Enterprise C before they vanished? Before they exploded in that thing when they were rescuing those Klingons? And what happened with the Enterprise A and what happened with, the original Enterprise back in the day. And they look at this and they say, you know what? You're right. We should send a professional costumer with them. Captain Picard, you should be aware that this slot on your ship is going to be taken up by a costumer. And Picard saying, I don't know why. Well, tough luck. It's orders. You are ordered to bring this costumer with them. And then, 2 years into the series, Picard just writes back to whoever it was that insisted on this at Starfleet and says, Thank you for thinking of this. I would never have thought of it. But it's the only justification for her to be there, and yet somehow the justification of Enterprise kind of just works in universe. And it's this weird thing that it makes no sense, and yet it makes complete sense, and it fills me with glee that somewhere on the Enterprise is just a professional costumer. So I think I have said everything about this that's important. Oh yes, Ensign Ro is in this, so if you're an Ensign Ro fan, which, I am, there's that too. Because Ensign Ro is always awesome, because that's just, she just is. So I think that's all I have to say, and I will see you all next week.